Hello and welcome to Geography e-learning for March 19th. Today's topic has to do with the various races involved with the Cold War and the secrecy that came along with that. We'll get into Chernobyl as well as a topic for today. The basis of this original video here, this first one that we're going to talk about, has to do with the different races that came along with the Cold War. We've already mentioned in previous days, Cold War is going to be direct competition between the United States and the Soviet Union, and it ran the gamut of everything you can possibly think of. If there was something that we could compete with the Soviet Union in, it was going to happen. Everything from political ideology to the Olympics and everything in between was going to be fair game. You might remember in 1980, we had the Miracle on Ice because it was such a big deal that not that the US won the gold medal because they won the gold medal later, it was because the United States beat the Soviet Union. Um, Political ideology all over the world. They were fighting not against directly each other, but proxy wars, things like the Korean War, the Vietnam War. It was about democracy versus communism and ultimately what was going to win out. Now, in between there, you're going to find things like the space race. Who was ultimately going to reach outer space first? Who was going to have more discoveries with regards to that. Ultimately, who is going to go to the moon first? You had excessive secrecy that went on. So, espionage, spying on each other was something that was going to regularly happen in the 40s, 50s, 60s, all the way into the 80s and 90s. It was going to be a big, big deal to try and find out what the other side was doing and try to one up them. And this is really where one of the best known races comes in, and that would be the arms race. And that's what you see on your screen right now. This is showing us nuclear weapons that were created between the Soviet Union and the United States from 1945 all the way up through 2010. Not just created, but what we would have had available. And as you can see, from 1945 all the way up through about 1985, the number of weapons rose and rose and rose. It was simply if the United States built one rocket, then the Soviet Union feels like they better build two. If they built two, we better build four. If they built four, so on and so on and so on. Ultimately, it was all a part of a program called mutually assured destruction. The thinking was that if we could destroy them as much as they could destroy us, it became a deterrent that we would be less likely to use those nuclear weapons if we had the equal amount of capability to destroy them as they could us. Um, so once again, that's called mutually assured destruction. And as you can see, it built and built and built until we finally got to a point where we just felt like we don't need these anymore. This is craziness. You're going to have two leaders, Mikhail Gorbachev on the Soviet side, Ronald Reagan on the American side, who are ultimately going to broker a deal that's going to start to de-escalate this. But it was going to continue in other areas. Things like technology was going to be a big place where we're going to continue to compete. Um, Ultra secrecy was going to be the rule of the day, specifically on the Soviet side. But that is something that we'll talk about in our next video.